Good evening and welcome to the April meeting of the Committee of Adjustments. Before we begin tonight, I'm going to ask Christine to read our territorial land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Tyler. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between our Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you. So I'd like to start by introducing our committee. To my right, we have Mr. Steve Miller, Ms. Louise Lalonde, Ms. Christine Collier, and Mr. Wayne Roth. This evening with us is also Cameron Miller, our planner for the Township, and my name is Tyler Bowman, the chair of this committee. We are an independent body appointed by Wilmot Township Council. We have the power to make minor changes to existing zoning regulations and some changes to existing non-conforming uses and to give consent. Each applicant will be notified in writing of the decision within 10 days. With the decision will be instructions on how to appeal it. Any decision made by this committee can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal, who will then hold a meeting and make a final decision. Only the applicant and certain prescribed public agencies can appeal the committee's decision. If the decision on a minor variance is not appealed, it becomes final and binding after 20 days from the date of this meeting. If the decision on a consent item is not appealed, it becomes final and binding after 20 days from the date the decision is mailed. This evening, the format will be as followed. Mr. Miller will introduce the application. The applicant will then be invited to come forward and add any additional information they choose. Following that, anyone else in the audience will have the opportunity to speak for or against the application. The committee members may then question the applicant. The committee will then make a decision. So before we begin speaking about the applications, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, I'll invite Cameron to start with our first application.
Yes, thank you. The first application is a minor variance A01/24 concerning 182 Shade Street in New Hamburg. And so this application is proposing to allow for an increase in the maximum allowable interior height of a second level loft of an accessory building, not exceeding 4.5 meters in height from 1.8 meters to approximately 2.4 meters. So the applicant's proposing a detached building in the rear of the property. And so in residential zones, the maximum height of a detached accessory building is 4.5 meters, but not exceeding 1 story. And so by definition, the second story is when the interior height of an attic is greater than 1.8 meters. So in this case, the building has an overall height that does comply with the zoning bylaw, but technically, by definition, that second level loft exceeds 1.8 meters. So by definition, this is considered to be a second story, and therefore this is a 2-story building. This building would have similar massing to, again, a technical 1-story building, and the overall height of the structure does not exceed the maximum. Staff did not receive any concerns when they circulated the application and are recommending that it be approved.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to speak? No? Anyone else want to speak on this application to it? No? Okay, are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, could I get a motion from the committee on this application? Moved by Ms. Lalonde, seconded. Christine, all in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. Cameron.
Yes, thank you. Moving on, the next application is minor variance A02/24 concerning 1604 Notre Dame Drive. So this application is proposing to reduce the required rear yard setback of a main building from 7.5 meters to approximately 4.25 meters to allow for a covered deck. So the property is currently developed with a single detached dwelling. An addition was constructed to the home in 2015, which required previous Committee of Adjustment approval at that time in 2015 to reduce the rear yard setback requirement to 6 meters. The language of this decision was specified to an addition, and so the owners are now proposing a covered deck to the rear of the house, which is within 4.25 meters of the rear property line, which requires them to return to the committee for Committee of Adjustment approval on this. The main part of the house is situated approximately a little bit under 10 meters from the rear property line, so meaning that any further additions, including a covered deck, if they're over 2 or 3 meters, is already deficient. And would need to be very small in size to avoid the need to coming to the committee for a rear yard reduction. So given that the minimum rear yard setback for a detached accessory building is technically only 1 meter if this covered deck were to be detached, staff are of the opinion that this request is minor and meets the intent of the zoning bylaw. In circulating the application, we did not receive any concerns.
Would the applicant like to speak? No? Anyone else in the audience? No? Seeing none. Committee members, do you have any questions concerning this? No? So could I get a motion to move this application? For motion by Mr. Roth, seconded by Ms. Lalonde. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. Cameron, I'll turn it back to you.
Yes, thank you. Moving on to the consent application of the evening. We'll be dealing with BO3/24, which is concerning 1236 Carmel Cook Road, as well as BO4/24, which is concerning 567 Wilmot Line, and then finally BO5/24, which is concerning 585 Wilmot Line. So these applications are proposing to sever lands, which would be donated to Rare Charitable Research Reserve for conservation purposes, while also retaining 3 lots that are each presently developed with a single detached dwelling as non-farm lots. And so a property location map was attached to the staff report, which outlines the layout of each of the retained and severed parcels. So these applications and these properties were previously subject to an official plan amendment application as well as a zone change application, which were both approved by council in March of this year. These previous applications also restricted the uses on the lands that are to be donated for conservation purposes, and also reduced the minimum lot area and lot frontage requirements for the retained lands, which would then facilitate the applications that are before the committee tonight. The Region of Waterloo has requested that a conservation easement be registered on title, and that essentially is to differentiate the ecological conservation areas on the retained lands with the agricultural use areas that have occurred historically on the retained parcels. Some of the property has been farmed for several generations, and it's their intent to continue that on some parts of the property. This is reflected in the approved zoning that through the previous zone change application. The lands contain several core environmental features and are regulated therefore by Grand River Conservation Authority. When they were circulated on these applications, they recommended that these applications be approved. And again, through these previous council approvals through both the official plan amendment applications and the zone change applications, the policies are in place to allow for these consents to proceed, and these applications before the committee tonight are simply to implement a decision of council and to allow these lands to be donated in their entirety. No concerns were received through circulating of these specific applications, and staff are recommending approval of the consents.
So would the applicant like to speak? No? I'm excited that this one is here, to be honest. Anybody else want to speak to this application? No? Does the committee have any questions regarding it? Mr. Roth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Miller, I know that the parking situation on Carmel Cook is already regulated and well signed as well. Could you refresh my memory as to what the plan is for the Wilmot line on that regard?
Yes, there are seasonal parking restrictions that will be implemented on Carmel Cook Road as well as Wilmot Line. So again, that was more subject to the previous council approvals, which is going to be implemented through a bylaw enforcement as well. So yeah, there are seasonal parking restrictions and year-round parking restrictions on Wilmot Line and Carmel Cook Road, which were discussed more through the zone change application process.
Would it be a safe assumption that the signage would be as effective on the Wilmot line as it is on Carmel Cook?
Yeah, exact signage has not yet been placed to my knowledge.
No, it has
however,
not.
yeah, to my knowledge, but however, yeah, that would all be through our bylaw enforcement department and our roads department, and ensuring that there's proper signage so that people who are visiting the area are notified of the change in rules unless they've been up to date with these applications.
Thank you.
Any others? Seeing none, I'd like to have somebody move this application. Ms. Lalonde, seconded by Steve. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And I believe that was one more, yes. Okay, I don't have it in front of me. That might be my mistake. Mr. Miller, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, the last consent application is B06/24, which is 1611 Snars Road East in Petersburg. And so this essentially is what's called a certificate of cancellation. So in 2001, perhaps some members of the committee may recall this, there was an application to sever a new industrial lot in Petersburg, which is now municipally addressed as 1611 Snars Road East. The owners of 1611 Snars Road East, which are in attendance tonight, acquired a budding parcel recently, which is 1591 Snars Road East. And their intention was to dissolve the property lines between the parcels. And it was discovered that these properties could not merge automatically, despite being in common ownership, because 1611 Snars Road East was originally created by consent. And so there's an expression, once a severance, always a severance, or once a consent, always a consent. So this application, which is going to utilize a tool through the Planning Act, which authorizes the Committee of Adjustment to approve a certificate of cancellation. And so essentially what this would do would cancel the original consent granted in 2001 to allow the lots to merge. And so approval of this certificate is essentially a housekeeping item. 1591 and 1611 Snars Road East are already in common ownership. They have one PIN, one parcel identification number, and so this simply ensures that the properties are legally merged together and that they can't be conveyed separately in the future without approval to do so. And if they ever wanted to sever them again, they'd have to come back to the Committee of Adjustment. So essentially this is just allowing them to finally merge these two properties and continue on with improvements to the site. And that's it.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to speak on behalf of this application? No? Anyone else? No? Committee, do we have any questions? Seeing none, I'd like to get a motion from the committee to move it. Mr. Roth, seconded. Ms. Lalonde, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Our last order of business tonight is the approval of our minutes from our last meeting last month. Can I get a motion on these minutes? Mr. Miller, seconded. Sorry, Christine. All in favor? Thank you, and that's carried. I don't believe there's any new business, so we'll end our meeting there. Thank you.